those of you who may not have encountered the novel yet, it might be a tad confusing to follow the reading, but I am hoping it will still be fun. And this is a murder mystery. Colombo, 1990. Maali Almeida, war photographer, gambler and closet gay, has woken up dead in what seems like a celestial visa office. His dismembered body is sinking in the Baira lake, and he has no idea who killed him. At a time when scores are settled by death squads, suicide bombers, and hired goons, the list of suspects is depressingly long, as the ghouls and ghosts who cluster around him can attest. But even in the afterlife, time is running out for Maali. He has 7 moons to try and contact the man and woman he loves the most and lead them to a hidden cache of photos that will rock Sri Lanka.
The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida is a work of fiction. Its characters are imagined. However, some politicians and others active at the time the book takes place, which is 1989 and 1990, are mentioned by their real names.
First moon. Father, forgive them, for I will never. Richard de Zoisa, Good Friday, 1975.
Baira Lake. On Tuesday, 4th December 1989, a few minutes after 4 a.m., 2 men in sarongs dumped 4 bodies in the Baira Lake. It was not the first time either of them have done this or done it drunk or done it at this hour. On this day, the Baira Lake smells like a powerful deity has squatted over it, emptied its bowels, and forgotten to flush. The men get plastered on stolen arak, not because years of dumping bodies have broken their nerve or grieved their conscience, but because breathing the stench sober feels like inhaling a public urinal. The first body is wrapped in rubbish bags. It wears a safari jacket with 5 large pockets filled with bricks, stylishly accessorized with 1 sandal, 3 chains, and a camera around the neck. The men use coir rope to tie bricks to the battered torso. They think they know knots, despite being neither sailors nor Cub Scouts. They hurl the body with the grace of shot putters, and it lands with a splash that barely clears the distance of a schoolyard jump. The first bottle of arak robs them of disgust. The second takes away their motor skills. The knots give way as soon as the body hits the warmth of the Baira, and the bricks sink into the black waters. They try the same with the other corpses. One sinks and one floats. Columns of stone Buddhas from the floating temple stare down at the buoyant dead with neither interest nor alarm. Monitor lizards slither past the corpses during their morning dip. River birds argue over who gets to eat the eyes. The Baira Lake used to be 3 times this size and was used to hide all manners of vice. Much lies buried in the centuries since the Portuguese merchant Lopo de Brito diverted the Kelani River to thwart a marauding King Vijayabahu. It used to stretch through Panadura, out by Colombo's backside, to join Volgoda Lake. The Dutch seized it and squeezed it into canals. The English purloined it and put it to work. Corpses of traders, sailors, prostitutes, gangsters, and innocents lie rotting in its belly. And every decade it lets out a belch that covers Slave Island in its rancid breath.
You fool, burps Balal Ajit. You didn't put tape.
I tied only. You said hurry. What time for tape? Says Kuttu Nihal.
Those knots were looser than your Amma's Reda.
What you say?
Just there. Navam Mavata, that hardware store sells masking tape. Would have taken 5 minutes.
It's not open.
So go open it.
Ayo, I can't. The Abhityas are waking. Can't be punching priests early morning.
Balal Ajit takes off his t-shirt and tucks the front of his sarong between his legs and over his arse crack. He lets out another burp. Curried cow's stomach exits Balal Ajit's gut and then his throat. He relives the taste of Babat marinated in old arak.
This is why Kottaya, you and me need to put a swim.
The body has also become shirtless, its ribs caved in like a broken coconut. You try not to look at the battered bones, the flesh in the beard, or the chunks missing from the face. But you do. You know these animals. They work at the casino and are paid to beat those who beat the house and collect from those whom the house has beaten. You didn't know that they worked as garbage men. Kunnu Karya is a euphemism for those who dispose of bodies that can't get death certificates. A garbage man is cheaper to hire than a dirty magistrate.
Abbreviations. You once made a cheat sheet for Andrew McGowan, a young American journo confused by Lanka's abbreviations. You recycled it many times for many visitors over many years. Dear Andy, to an outsider, the Sri Lankan tragedy will appear confusing and irreparable. It needn't be either. Here are the main players. LTTE, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, want a separate Tamil state, prepared to slaughter Tamil civilians and moderates to achieve this. JVP, the Janata Vimukti Perumuna, want to overthrow the capitalist state, are willing to murder the working class while they liberate them. UNP, the United National Party, known as the Uncle-Nephew Party, in power since the late 1970s and embroiled in the above two wars. STF, the Special Task Force, on behalf of the government, will abduct and torture anyone suspected of being or abetting the LTTE or the JVP. The nation divides into races, the races divide into factions, and the factions turn on each other. Whoever is in the opposition will preach multiculturalism and then enforce Sinhala Buddhist dominance in exchange for power. You are not the only outsider here, Andy. There are many others as confused as you are. IPKF, the Indian Peacekeeping Force, sent by a neighbor to preserve peace, are willing to burn villages to fulfill this mission. UN, United Nations, have offices in Colombo, are assholes to work with. RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, Indian Secret Service here to broker dodgy deals, are best avoided. CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, sits on the shores of Diego Garcia Islands holding very powerful binoculars. Is this true, Andy? Say it ain't so. It's not that complicated, my friend. Don't try and look for the good guys, because there ain't none. Everyone is greedy and proud, and no one can solve anything without money changing hands or fists being raised. Things have escalated beyond what anyone imagined, and they keep getting worse and worse. Stay safe, Andy. These wars aren't worth dying over. None of them are. Maali.
Second moon. Everything happens to everybody, sooner or later, if there is time enough. George Bernard Shaw.
After party. You told them about the box under your bed at one of the Arts Center after parties. You told it to Dee and Jackie and to an uncle named Clarenta Deben. All three were drunk at the time, and you didn't expect them to remember. Dee hated the after parties, where ashtrays filled and liquid spilled, and the photos you took went into a box. He would crawl into his room in a sulk and pound on the walls when the decibels rose.
You are not going to invite those morons to our home again, are you?
Jackie wants to.
The after parties happened on the terrace that looked on to Gall Face Green, and and the balcony overlooking the Taj car park. The living room was colossal and had enough soft surfaces to park inebriated bums belonging to the Colombo party set. Sena was right. Maali Almeida didn't just go to Colombo 7 parties, he hosted them.
Your flat was central to 3 of Colombo's nightclubs, 2000, Chapter and the Blue. So whoever Jackie had been dancing with ended up there. The guests, sprawled on cushions, got drunk on espresso from Didi's coffee maker, on cassettes from Didi's ghetto blaster, and on booze stolen from Didi's dad, while Didi lay in Didi's bed and thought Didi thoughts. The recently graduated international school kids would sit there chugging vodka and moaning about having to run their parents' companies. The drama crowd would smoke dope and bitch about the drama crowd before hooking up with members of the drama crowd. The expat set would gaze out from the balcony at coconut trees silhouetted against ocean and wax poetic on the beauty of Lanka. It was true. When the wind blew through the balcony and the smoke and the laughter filled the breeze, it was easy to forget that a war was being fought just 10 minutes away from here. Over here, the stars and the lights of Colombo sang out in yellows and greens. The roads were quiet and the ocean purred. And Colombo wrapped itself in a safety blanket that we did not deserve. The night you remember was the after party following Miss Working Girl 1989. Your friend Clarentha, the male curator at the Lionel Wendt Gallery, was one of the judges and had treated his favorite misfits to free tickets, though not all were appreciative.
Only Lanka will have beauty pageants and cricket matches while the country burns, said Jackie, serving Stanley's vodka to the guests in our lounge.
On the balcony, a girl who inherited a cafe and a boy groomed to run a bank, both barely out of their teens, were making out. A tea broker was arguing politics with a radio DJ in the kitchen. On the cushions, joints were being passed between strangers and pills were being turned into powder in a pestle used for grinding chili. A stout woman in a kaftan and a chubby boy wearing a feather boa plopped down next to you and Jackie. They sprinkled fun dust onto your drinks and addressed Clarentha as speaking to the king. Uncle Clara, you look fabulous, as always, said the boy, bowing like a butler. Great speech.
Said the woman, eyeing Jackie's hitched up skirt.
You look very, very familiar. Uncle Clarentha was sociable even when he was tired. And that parade of dolls in bikinis and business suits must have been as tedious to judge as it was to watch, especially since Clarentha was twice as homo as you and 10 times as closeted.
I am Radhika Fernando, said the woman. I read the news on Rupa Bahini. This is my fiancé, Bhuvaneka.
You are that Minister Cyril Vijayaratne's son, no?
The boy in the boa blushed. He's my uncle. I'm not into politics. He looked at you, as if requesting permission to smile. The fun dust curdled in your throat, inducing a burp that you tasted like you imagined poison would. You nodded.
Look at this bubble, partying after beauty contests while our soldiers die. Radhika Fernando had come over to give a speech, and she was doing it in her news voice.
Nothing wrong with bubbles, baby, said Bhuvaneka, raising a champagne glass. What else to do when you're trapped in curfew, Colombo?
Radhika launched into a monologue which you struggled to follow. It began by criticizing Clarentha's speech, which forecast a bright future for Lanka's working girls.
Hard to imagine a bright future when over 4,000 are raped in this country every year, many by their own family.
Clarentha slunk back as he usually did from conflict. Jackie leaned in.
And what are you doing, apart from reading about it on TV? Asked Jackie.
Radhika blushes, as if expecting the jab. I'm a hypocrite like you, sweetie. All our heads are colonized by Hollywood. We are brainwashed by rock and roll. The people dying up there aren't really our people, are they? What's your name, pretty?
It was then you knew that this Radhika woman was tripping balls. And when Bhuvanika's eyes started multiplying, you realized that you were too. Around the room, the chatter and movement became blurry and distant. A note escaped from the record player and hung in the air, and it was unclear whether it came from the throat of Freddie or Elvis or Shaking Stevens. You settled down and stroked Jackie's head as she told the newsreader her name. Radhika and Bhuvanika formed a vaudeville double act. She did impassioned speeches. He did revolutionary sound bites. She ranted about how evil doesn't know it is evil, like the mad don't know that they are insane, that America doesn't think it has invaded too many democracies and killed too many innocents, that we shouldn't let them slaughter like the worst tyrants and drop bombs on children, that there is nothing exceptional about a country built on genocide and the back of slaves.
I thought like that in high school, said Jackie. Who would you rather have in charge, the Soviets or the Japs?
If I'd grown up listening to Russian metal and watching Kurosawa, maybe it wouldn't sound ridiculous.
Russian metal sounds cool, Jackie smiled.
Napalm came from Harvard. The atom bomb came from Princeton. The H bomb from the Manhattan Project.
You think the tigers know they're evil? You asked, and no one answered.
Does our government? Muttered Bhuvanika. Bhuvanika Vijayaratne, nephew of the Minister of Justice.
And then the music swelled, and Radhika was kissing Jackie and Bhuvanika was licking you. And suddenly you were in Jackie's room, and all the lights were shining, and the sound was gloomy and unmusical, and Jackie was saying, please stop.
We are not like that, sorry, I think we had too much.
Radhika massaged her neck and Bhuvanika held your hand. You cannot believe that you just kissed the nephew of Satan.
Honey, we are all wasted, said Radhika.
You two are engaged? You asked.
I'm his frock, he's my beard. Radhika stopped massaging and lay back on Jackie's bed. If that wasn't bloody obvious.
We have a group that meets every month. You two should come, said Bhuvanika.
We are not like that,
What
said
are you
Jackie.
like then? Asks Radhika, her toe drawing patterns on Jackie's spine.
Jackie looked at you and you looked at the Ouija board next to Jackie's cassettes.
Are you guys up for a seance? You asked.
Clarenta Damel enters the room with one of his Miss Working Girl contestants whose answer to the favorite author question was Enid Blyton. Someone say seance?
Third mode. You forget what you want to remember, and you remember what you want to forget. Cormac McCarthy, The Road.
The rule imposed by the Sri Lankan government for all embedded journalists was that they did not lodge with or break bread with terrorists. This was not official AP policy, and in the fog of war was subject to the discretion of the reporter and fixer. Johnny introduced you to many journalists, all of whom had the same request. Can we see the bodies? Can we get an interview with the leader? The former was possible, the latter not at all. You explained to them that you cannot build rapport with any fighting force without sharing a cup of tea. And talking to the Supremo was as easy as an exclusive with Elvis.
It was in early 87, one of your first assignments. Your reporter was Andy McGowan, a chirpy lad with a broken heart, working for Newsweek as a stringer. Johnny had paid you a hefty advance, which you gloriously doubled at the Pegasus before spectacularly quartering it at a poker game with other war correspondents.
It was your second visit to Vavonia on the hunt for child soldiers. There were reports of teenagers being trained in suicide squads and orphans being taught to use T-56s. And you had taken Andy all across the north and found no evidence of either.
At the Vavonia barracks, you found Associated Press correspondent Robert Sudworth, furious that his fixer had ditched him when asked to explore the jungles of the Vandi. The commanding officer, Major Raja Udugampola, future head of the STF, refused to give them army protection in enemy territory. He was your former boss and was unlikely to grant you special favors considering how you parted.
Unlike Andy, the scruffy gonzo, Sudworth was always well turned out. Even in the field, he wore designer camouflage and tailored slacks. He conquered McGowan with the usual charm offensive. Terribly sorry to say this, but the child soldier angle is a non-starter. I got some leads in Akkaraippattu, but the Tigers will not let you photograph or interview them, and no family with children will talk.
Sudworth led the two of you to his borrowed jeep and told you in hushed voices. There's another story, chaps. If we pool our resources, we can share the exclusive. Bob Sudworth's resources included a bodyguard named Sid, a Scotsman who apparently spoke English, though you understood none of what came out of his mouth. Built like a tank and appointed by KM Services, a private security firm for mercenaries, he wore camouflage and boots and carried an Uzi.
According to Sudworth, there was a village of civilians that were being forcibly combat trained by the LTTE. The army had the location, but weren't ready to send in force. You had no way of getting entry and told them so. And then Sudworth revealed that the budget that had room for a bodyguard also had a generous allocation for you.
After many disclaimers, you agreed to drive them there and were amazed at how easily you talked your way from the Nambukulam checkpoint to the Omanthai one. When you arrived at the village, it was clear why.
There were old men and young women, uncles, grandmas, farmers, cowherds, and school teachers, all loading rifles and firing at targets, all under the supervision of Colonel Gopalaswamy, aka Mahatya, a founding tiger cadre from the Supremo's village, whose stock was rising within the chain of command. The tall mustachioed colonel was a leaner, hungrier version of the Supremo and agreed to interviews with Sudworth and McGowan and gave permission to photograph the villagers.
None of them admitted to being coerced into anything, and none of them looked to be speaking under duress. We fear the army more than we fear them. The army burned our village, said a boy barely out of school, but too old to be of any use for the child soldier angle. We are training to protect ourselves from threats like these.
Major Raja's staff saw the story as an example of civilian oppression under the LTTE. But the Tigers were spinning it as a tale of people power. This war will never end, you think as you watch the villagers fire their weapons. You were allowed to try out your Nikon without restrictions and told only, never shoot the colonel, though you ended up doing just that.
McGowan and Sudworth, now Andy and Bob to you, called you the finest fixer east of Mexico and promised a fat bonus to your fixer fee. And just then, the army announced its arrival with a lobbed grenade. Bullets stabbed the air and maimed the trees and made holes in the ground. You and Bob and Andy scrambled to what looked like, but couldn't have been, a tea bush. You huddled between the rock at its base. Bodyguard Sid drew his Uzi and took bullets in his shooting arm and watched the gun sail into the dust and swore like a Scotsman before passing out.
They say it is like firecrackers, but that is only partly true. It is like firecrackers played through loudspeakers positioned right next to your eardrums. McGowan started to weep. Sudworth repeated a single cuss word, and the dust started popping around you as if invisible rains were pelting the ground. And then the air was smoke and noise and shrieks. The three of you huddled under a flat rock behind that flimsy bush and prayed to gods you didn't believe in.
So you did what you needed to. You tied your red bandana to a stick and wedged it into the bush, where it flew high like a flag of truce drenched in blood. For the 45 minutes of that noisy and inconclusive gun battle, not a single bullet came your way. Fourth moon. I am an angel. I kill firstborns while their mamas watch. I turn cities to salt. I even, when I feel like it, rip the souls from little girls. And from now till kingdom come, the only thing you can count on in your entire existence is never understanding why. Greg Wyden, The Prophecy.
The palace. Major Raja Udgampola was a desk soldier. You saw him on the field only once, Akkaraipat in 87. First, he ordered the earth movers to dig graves large enough to bury villages in. Then he made soldiers dress the bodies in tiger uniforms and pose them. Then he made you and the lake house hacks take the photos. Then he confiscated your film.
None of the other photographers lasted more than 2 massacres. Most couldn't stomach the gore and many were averse to the high risk and average pay. But you were hooked. Because according to silly old you, the problem was that the folks in Colombo and London and Delhi didn't know the full extent of the horror. And maybe clever young you could produce the photo that turned policy makers against the war. Do for Lanka's civil war what naked napalm girl did for Vietnam.
The major ordered all embedded journalists to call him if they ever got a whiff of where the Supremo was hiding. He shared a 6-digit number and dangled a 6-figure reward at anyone who led him to Prabhakaran. And this time, the figure wasn't in rupees. This was early in the war, when the army was stupid enough to believe that the Supremo could be caught and the war could be won. To Major Raja, journalists were more expendable than the bullets his bosses bought from the British, which is another reason why so many quit.
The memory arrives in the form of a cough. A whooping cough that hurts your brain and makes you roll forward. It singes the edges of nerves you no longer have and takes you back to a place that was both room and corridor. The walls were lined with filing cupboards and display cabinets, Uzi machine guns, Browning revolvers, dum-dum bullets and boom-boom grenades, all preserved under glass in a military museum belonging to a major who had never fired a weapon in anger or fear.
You stood at the desk, looking down on the big man's balding head. You attempted to clear your throat, and it brought forth a cough. One more violent than expected. Major Raja Udgampola, aka King Raja, looked at you in revulsion.
Need to see a doctor?
No sir, just smoker's cough.
Is that what you call it, not homo's cough?
You stood still for a very long time while he watched you. There was a vacant seat before you and he did not offer it, so you remained on your feet. On the table was a file bearing your name and photographs from front lines taken by you. Black and white, 18 inches by 5, matte finish. It was the shelling at VVT, where mortar landed flaming bodies onto coconut trees. It lies on a stack of photos and you remember each one. It was a season of monthly massacres, when both sides took turns slaughtering villages as payback for the last month's carnage. The major only ordered photo shoots of tiger atrocities, Kokilai, Kent Farm, Dollar Farm, Habarana, Anuradhapura. State-sponsored slaughter rarely required photography.
This is good work. We have to document these things. What the tigers do to innocent women, children and babies. Otherwise Tamils will say these things didn't happen.
A pause hangs between us.
Such a shame about the other thing, no?
Sir,
Melinda Albert Kabalana, he said looking down at your file. We will not be renewing your contract after today.
my contract doesn't expire till 1990.
Correct, but your behavior violates Penal Code 1883.
I'm not familiar
You
with
are having unnatural relations with soldiers. This cannot be tolerated in wartime or any time. You have been warned before.
Any relationship in the war zone is unnatural. Friendships are forced and brittle. Terror and boredom and loneliness can brew strange alliances, and comfort can be found in a stranger's arms. You knew how to spot a beautiful boy who liked handsome men, whether they were in uniform or sarong or national dress, whether they were smiling on a bus or arguing with their wives. You only played with the quiet ones, the village boys, the confused loners, the ones with no one to squeal to, or so you thought.
The major stood up, did a slow march around the desk, and came to a halt by your side. He watched you for a while, and you kept your eyes front. He rubbed his hand on your cheek and let his fingers brush your neck.
Are you a sissy?
No, sir.
His fingers brushed past the things around your neck, back when you wore more than 3. The ankh, the ohm, the dog tag, the capsules, the blood vial, all the way down to your belly and below to your crotch. He rubbed with the back of his fingers, not with force, though not all that lightly, as if looking for rolls of film hiding behind delicate flesh. His hands were calloused and his touch was tender. You stood at attention and remained stoically soft.
You know it's not just one problem.
You stood frozen as his fingers lingered on your shriveling groin.
There is a rumor that you are sick. Will I get AIDS from touching you?
He pulled his hands from you, walked behind his desk, and picked up his hat from a nail on the wall.
Let's go. 5th moon. Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things that thou knowest not. Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 3.
Pocket jacks. You and Jackie used to call the blackjack table the BJ table, just for kicks, even though neither you nor she had ever given or received one while seated there. If you just play the percentages at blackjack and count the run of cards, you can make a tidy gain over time. The Pegasus Casino only had 2 card packs in the shoe, which made it easier to count even for your tiny brain. The casino was arranged in a semicircle around with a buffet at the entrance, like a horseshoe that sucks up luck. The roulette wheels on either end of the U are the noisiest. The blackjack and baccarat tables are the most crowded, and the poker tables at the bend in the U are the dimmest lit.
You had formulas for beating the house at cards. You had methods for surviving the bullets in war zones. And you had techniques for smelling bullshit. At blackjack, you only had to beat the dealer, whose behavior you could predict. In the war zone, you had to know who was dropping bombs and where not to step. With bullshitters, you have to figure out what they need from you. You got a run of picture cards, and the dealer kept going bust. And you saw that you had 2 hours before your first meeting and 3 before your second. You thought of the note on pink paper that you had left on Didi's badminton racket. Come to the Leo bar at 11 p.m. tonight. I will have news. Love, Maali.
On your last tour up north, you told yourself and whoever was listening that if you survived the shelling, you would leave. You would cash in your chips, pledge yourself to Didi, and follow him wherever he needed to go. The only thing worth less than 2 promises is 3. It felt good to be rid of Elsa and Kuga. They had given you a fat check on the promise of the negatives, a promise you had every intention of keeping. Soon you would be rid of them all, or so you hoped.
You took your fat check to the blackjack dealer, and then you took your winnings and sidled up to your favorite table, right there at the turn of the horseshoe. The high stakes poker where the rich kids, the pimps, the gun runners, and the economic hitmen came to steal from each other. You owe me money, my hippie friend, said the Karachi kid, sitting on a stack of 40 large. He wore sunglasses and drank vodka, even though you were supposed to do neither at this table. He passed you a drink knowing you would refuse. But that is okay. Today let us play.
It was a 6-hand game. Next to the Pakistani were 2 Chinese men, one short, one hefty. And next to them a drunken Lankan uncle, flanked by 2 Maldivian women. At the foot of the table was Yael Menahem, the clear chip leader with a stack that was 60 deep. The 2 armed dealers at the table made no acknowledgement of knowing each other. Big China and Little China were mostly silent, except between hands, when they traded jokes in Mandarin and laughed without sharing the punchline. The Israeli was the most talkative at the table and the most skilled.
Everyone seemed to be stealing from a drunken Lankan uncle who was holding bad hands and getting drawn into impossible showdowns. He went all in on a pair of aces and watched the Karachi kid make a straight. He stumbled off to the buffet, hoping the Maldivian ladies would follow, which they don't. You had a straight draw, said the Israeli to the Karachi kid. You play tight when you're fishing and lose when you're bluffing. The Pakistani just stared ahead and chewed gum. Things got loud when Little China raced on the flop and Yael Menahem threw in half his stack. When he saw that Little China raced with nothing and caught a full house, the Israeli threw a tantrum.
Who are these people? Are these poker players? Who raises with Jack 3? He swore at the dealer and walked off with his chips. Big China and Little China followed him with steely eyes and shared another joke in Mandarin. You and the Karachi kid had been playing silent and aggressive. You got some hands, but everyone folded whenever you raised. You had under half an hour to meeting one and decided to make the play. The Karachi kid knocked back his vodka and moved his entire stack into the middle. Let us see who pays whom tonight. These gooks have small dicks. They will fold, even if they have an ace.
There was muttering in Mandarin, and this time no joke. They both glared at the Pakistani. One took the bait, the other folded. With everyone stacked in the middle, the action moved to you. In movies, a crowd would have gathered at the table. Women of easy virtue would drape themselves at the highest roller. Security guards will utter safe words into walkie-talkies. And drunks will stumble by to ooh, ah. But this showdown took place in dim light, with just the dealer and hell below as witness.
You never prayed when you gambled, or when you stepped onto a battlefield, or when you tasted flesh, or when you told someone you loved them. You calculated the odds, laid out the options, and then made the play. The chances of being born with extra toes is 1 in 1,000. The odds that the pilot is drunk is 1 in 117. And according to some, the chances of getting away with murder are 3 to 1. You expected the worst, guessed where the bombs may come from, made the boy wear a condom, asked the laws of probability to swing your way, which isn't the same as pleading to an invisible god. Or is it?
Jackie loved it when you did the maths. Even though she failed the subject twice in London, right after she told her mother about her stepfather, you pretended she was there. Oh Jackie, oh, even a 2 of hearts will beat your jacks. On a pot this high I would fold. There were 3 hearts on the table and 2 jacks in your hand. You pushed your stack into the middle. When the 9 of clubs showed up at the river, no one was cheering. Karachi threw down a king high straight. Little China giggled and Big China showed everyone the ace of hearts and the finger. He said something in Mandarin that was unlikely to be well played, mate, and looked at you.
You put your pocket jacks next to the pair of 9s and the jack of hearts and shrugged. An unnoticed full house will beat an obvious flush every day of the week and twice on Sundays. You wished you had a one-liner to leave the table with, but all you had was your artful dodger grin. The chips in the middle reached the crooks of both your elbows as you hugged them and brought them home. Big China placed his hands on his scalp and stared at the 3 jacks and the 2 9s. I guess tonight, Mr. Karachi, I finally get to erase my tab.
6th moon. We are what we pretend to be. So we must be careful about what we pretend to be. Kurt Vonnegut, Mother Night.
Clarentha and Viran are placing cardboard frames onto hooks and putting up the best of your wildlife photos. As per your list, they have omitted your shots of Didi and Jackie, of the wildflower monsoons of 1988. You and Didi had sat under a jacaranda tree, kissed in the rain, and agreed to stay together for one more year. He would save Lanka's natural beauty, and you would expose its man-made ugliness, expose the war and hasten its end. Monsoons and full moons make all creatures stupid, especially silly boys in love. Didi thumbs through photos of military hardware, the ones that filled the envelopes titled The King. Most of your best work for Raja Udgampola was never published. Captured tiger grenades, rocket launchers, rifles and boots packed into crates with Hebrew and Arabic stamps on them. Scared little boys in uniform huddling at the front lines. The bodies at Balvettitturai piled onto a pyre. The mass cremation that made you stop eating pork because the smoky stench of roasting humans wasn't dissimilar to chops on grills.
Viran delivered beautiful black and white prints of captured terrorists tied to logs, the wreckage of the helicopter of a moderate Tamil politician, the mangled hull of Air Lanka Flight 512 from Gatwick, taken before the bodies of the German, British, French and Japanese tourists were removed from the wreckage.
And then there was the last assignment for King Raja. That he did not see you since 1987 was an untruth. Soldiers have no problem bending the truth. They do it to themselves all the time. He had called you 3 months ago to the palace to photograph the JVP leader Rohana Vijayveera, alive and in custody. Sri Lanka's ugly Che Guevara had smiled with you and chatted with the guards. Minus the beard and the beret, he looked like a music teacher. 3 days later, you were called back to photograph this mutilated corpse.
There were photos from snipped off negatives that King didn't know you had. Father Jerome Balthazar, Anglican priest and human rights activist from Mannar, bound and gagged and dead in custody. Though the authorities claimed he had taken a boat to India. D.B. Pillai, Radio Ceylon journalist, shot in custody and dumped on the beach for the crime of reporting accurate casualties in his weekly broadcast. The burning car filled with young Tamil corpses, taken for Major Raja Udgampola's private files, but kept for yours.
All these now hang from the walls of the Vendit like you always hoped they would. Your plan was to orchestrate this from exile. Instead, you have staged it from beyond the grave. Bravo. Where are you going after this, Putta? Claranta asks Viran. He is rubbing Viran's back and twinkling his eyes. Viran arches his spine and smiles and clips the group shot of the Kokilai massacre survivors on a peg by the window. Where to go, uncle? I am flying to Bangkok with my wife tomorrow morning. You need to disappear as well. All of you, he says to the two helpers.
Viran leans into Clarenta and plants a soft kiss on the old man's ear. He was a gifted photo developer and a shameless star. Take me to Bangkok with you, leave your wife. Darling, I've been pondering that for 40 years. They leave through the front door while you sit in the gallery surrounded by your life's work and wait. You look at walls decorated with shots of pangolins and pogroms. They say the truth will set you free, though in Sri Lanka the truth can land you in a cage. And you have no more use for truth or cages or killers or lovers with perfect skin. All you have left are your images of ghosts, and that may well be enough.
Seventh moon. God's gift, the warden said. His violence. God loves violence. You understand that, don't you? Why else would there be so much of it? It's in us. It comes out of us. It is what we do more naturally than we breathe. There is no moral order at all. There is only this. Can my violence conquer yours? Dennis Lehane, Shutter Island.
Bad friends.
I will not have time to question her now, says the mask. You may have to use more sedation.
You get up close and see that Jackie is breathing. Her chest rises slowly and falls quickly. Her breath carries the smell of sedation. like nail polish mixed with syrups. You scream at the walls and the men outside. You cry out to whoever, who sends only silence and absence.
I will question her after the meeting, says the mask. If she knows where the negatives are, we may release her, but stay out of sight.
Why?
Don't tell me she saw you, asks the mask.
No, says Ranchagoda. I grabbed her from behind. Was wearing sunglasses.
Sheh, master of disguise. Let's hope you are telling the truth. If she has seen us, she cannot be released.
Kasim has returned as swiftly as he left.
This is Stanley Dharmendran's niece. The minister will have our guts, he hisses.
We lost the Elsa woman, says Ranchagoda. We need the negatives. This little girl knows where they are.
You lost the Elsa woman, snarls Kasim. I had nothing to do with it.
You plead in Ranchagowda's ears. Let her go. I will take you to the negatives. Please, please, please let her go. He hears nothing. The mask walks up to Kasim and puts his hand on his shoulder. They are roughly the same height, but the mask appears a head taller.
There is no I, me, or you, Detective Kasim. There is only we. You are part of the squad now.
Then I will go upstairs and type my resignation.
The mask squeezes his shoulder blades and Kasim punches in pain.
You will type what I tell you to type. Then you will stay here and make sure no one steps on this floor. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
I have a meeting with the boss and the big boss. Ranchagoda, I need you here. Kasim, give her more juice if she stirs and stay guard.
They both light up cigarettes in the corridor. Ranchagoda looks back at his partner and shrugs. Kasim slumps into a chair and stares through the window at the girl with the sack over her head. He rubs his shoulders and his sweaty neck. You whisper in his ear with everything you have. She's innocent. Please, please release her. You don't agree with this, Detective Kasim. You never have. This is against your religion. He pauses for a moment, looks around, then puts his face in his hands and lets out a groan. It's loud enough to wake the dead. But Jackie doesn't stir. His colleagues watch him with amusement and blow smoke in his direction. You call out to Dr. Rani, to the angels of silence and absence. You ask them to take you to the light, that you will sign any Ola book they put before you. You pray like you have never prayed, to the crow man's sorcery, to the gods you loathe, to the magic of electricity, and to the hand that rolls the dice. And in answer, you receive the quiet hum at the edge of the universe, followed by that great silence. You weigh your options, and you realize you have only one.
The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida. Shehan Karunathilaka was born in Galle, Sri Lanka. He grew up in Colombo, studied in New Zealand, and has lived and worked in London, Amsterdam, and Singapore. He emerged on the world literary stage in 2011 when he won the Commonwealth Prize, the DSL, and Gratian Prize for his debut novel, Chinaman. Karunathilaka is considered one of Sri Lanka's foremost authors. In addition to novels, he has written rock songs, screenplays, and travel stories, publishing in Rolling Stone, Gentleman's Quarterly, and National Geographic. He currently lives in Sri Lanka. Thank you. I do hope that all of you read the novel, and I hope it piqued your interest. It's a fascinating literary work, and although right at the onset I was maybe a wee flippant when I said it's a murder mystery, it is the truth of that time, it is the truth of this time, and I think it speaks a lot to us about also individually we having to take a stand against so many things happening all around us. And I'm very grateful to Goethe-Institut and to the Chennai Biennale that they called us to do this, because for us also it was a very deep journey to explore this novel and figure out what to read and what to leave out. It's impossible to leave out, but we try to do our best. So do please read the novel, maybe by all of us together reading, peace may prevail. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful reading. In case if anybody has any questions or comments,
Ask Bola.
ask anything.
There's never been a time when there was a war. There's always been a war since the beginning of
I
mankind.
feel like that.
I think the interesting word there is mankind, you know. So what are we identifying as mankind?
Yes.
Like, are we talking about from the time we started living in societies, in communities? Because at the time when as humans we were in clusters, you know, apart from figuring out our hunt, the question is, were there wars? Because there was no concept of property and possession. The whole concept of war is coming from the concept of property and possession, and to safeguard what we believe is our people. So, end of the day, there is, I mean, I may be speaking a lot out of context here, but it is institutionalization which has also led to us wanting to protect those institutions, hence war. If at the end of the day there was no concept of property or possession, there would be no wars. You know, whether it be in terms of God or language or community or caste or color or gender. So, yeah, let's hope there will be no more wars. But in 2004, I had an opportunity to direct a play called Thicker Than Blood, written by a Sri Lankan playwright called Delon Veerasinghe, and coincidentally also the winner of the Gratian Prize around that time. And the thing that he explores in that play was, we need war for peace. We need war for peace. And quite similar to this novel, it was about the meeting between a Sri Lankan soldier who is injured in the Vani and who is found by a Tamil who rescues him and nurses him back to health. So, war for peace.
Yeah, we need a peaceful bomb. We need the nuclear weapons for peace.
That's very cynical. That's very
It's not cynical, it is the truth.
Where's the red button? What does this button do?
Thank you all for having been here on a Sunday.
Thank you very
You know,
much.
sparing your Sunday mornings for this. Thank you so much. Please take care. Thank you.
Very well.